Welcome to Mondays with Mike, Game Changers in Lacrosse, where Harlem Lacrosse CEO Mike Levin covers topics related to lacrosse, education, and youth development. Welcome to the conversation. In this episode, we'll continue Mike's compelling conversation with Academy Award-nominated actor and lacrosse veteran Jeffrey Wright as they discuss the power of the sport and how Harlem Lacrosse is playing the long game, one student athlete at a time. Here's where we left off.
You talked very eloquently about not just being there, but being in a position to succeed and how the sport can play a role in that. So I'd love to hear your point of view on that. Like, how did lacrosse help put you in a position to be successful in those places? And what do you see as kind of the role of the sport in that way?
So whatever difficulties I had were largely my own. Or my own making. I didn't feel myself an outsider, and that's a huge greasing of the wheel for a student, and so the game can provide that. The game can mitigate some of the uneasiness for a student who comes from Harlem and who hasn't traveled, the circles of, these, relatively exclusive schools. It can provide a sense of ease and comfortability in these spaces, which I think is critical and I think is advantageous, because what it then can potentially provide is an ease not only in, inside the confines of, the ivory tower, but also in Harlem, in those rooms as well. And if you can combine that type of all around sense of ease and well-being, and you can walk through the world in that way, you can do a lot toward creating your own sense of freedom. And working from that perspective. So the game can be a seriously important tool for self-empowerment for kids such as me.
It's beautifully said, and exactly what we hope to achieve. I was talking to a corporate partner, a large corporation, really successful business, who just hired a Harlem Lacrosse alum in New York City last week, and went to Haverford College. Went to a great high school as well. He's grew up in Harlem, and they're thrilled to have him. And he's someone who I hope has leveraged his participation in the game to be able to navigate that space well. And we really try hard to support students in that process to make it a place where they can find success, whether it's a new school or a tournament or a team or some lacrosse space or an internship or a job. I'm curious because you mentioned the word self-determination, and in the speech you also talked about sort of like it gave you the freedom. Your lacrosse in a way gave you the freedom to pursue the education that you wanted to. Maybe it's just because I'm not an actor, but it seems like such a courageous choice to pursue the arts like that. Do you think that it helped you there to say, this is what I want to do? Like, the future that I want for myself is to be an actor, and now I have, I'm going to go ahead and chase that down. Do you think that your participation in the sport was part of that, or it was just kind of you had that acting in you as well?
Well, it's a combination of the two. Let me go back for a second. I'll just say to your point about, creating that, that you're talking about this young man who'd gone to Haverford and finding his own way through the game and finding, as we talked about, a level of comfortability. That's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing for these kids. It's super hard because there's a risk of feeling compromised, this balance between integrating and assimilating can be one that comes with, if it's not carefully managed, with a type of amputation of certain important cultural elements that a student might bring. It's a super tough challenge for kids to hold on to those things that strengthen them, that may be outside of the cultural setting of an exclusive school, to hold on to those while synthesizing them with the new components that they find in these new spaces. It's super hard. You got to understand this. It's super hard to ward off feelings of self-betrayal, of cultural betrayal, of selling out, or however it might be characterized. But rather, again, to marry the best of both worlds into something new and something personal that's organic to the individual. It takes work, and it takes guidance, the right type of guidance. So I just wanted to say that before we go any further. And it makes the academic experience, it provides additional challenges, to the academic, even with the success, because you're working, as all of these kids are, through these, these rites of passage that come with these years. And you're also working on these other elements that not all students have to contend with. Now, to your question as to whether lacrosse aided my transition to the arts, I will say, first, primarily, it did the exact opposite. Did not. Ultimately, it has been beneficial. I'll say it didn't because when I started when I started acting, it was my junior year of college. I had been very successful my freshman and sophomore years, super successful. And I went into my junior year, preseason, was doing very well, and I had started acting. I started acting because I had always loved the theater. My mom took me to the theater from a very young age and kind of planted the seed in me, a seed that never really fully germinated until I got to school. I didn't do any acting in high school. I was kind of afraid of it, and only began, as I said, junior year of college. And I got injured the last preseason game of my junior year. I just destroyed my ankle up on the AstroTurf at Hofstra playing against Washington College. We lost 17-5. I'll never forget. I had 3 goals, but didn't take away the pain. And so, man, I showed up, and the acting, it was like, I'm like, oh man, I couldn't do either. And it kind of threw off my season. And I guess my focus started to bend more toward the stuff that I was doing on stage. Then my senior year, second game of the season, ankle again. And I was doing a play at the time at the University of Massachusetts with this woman named Pearl Primus, who was like one of the foremost interpreters of African dance. It was a Wole Soyinka play called Lion and the Jewel. I was playing the lead, and she would get into me. I'd show up limping in the rehearsal, and she'd look Lakunle. She would call me by my, the character name. What are you going to do? Are you going to be? She said, you could be great. You could be great. But what are you going to do? You're going to be an actor, or you're going to be this lacrosse thing player, or whatever you are, And I was like, And so then when I got back on the field, my focus was split, and I was kind of thinking about being injured, and and it was just awful. And I didn't recover well from it was just an awful, awful experience. It didn't have to be. But what I wasn't able to do, because I didn't know, was understand the overlaps between athletics and the arts, particularly performance arts. what I was experiencing was that the focuses that are required are very similar. And I was drawing from one in a way that I wasn't necessarily best utilizing this reservoir of focus. And it was detracting from my lacrosse because I was prioritizing, I guess, the theater. But I could have, if I had been a little bit more sophisticated, I could have married the two. I guess, the original, Olympics, I think the Greeks were celebrating, both athletics and the arts. It was like Dionysian festival of theater and athletics, because there's a fraternal relationship between the two that I have only come to understand later. Because working in film or working in the theater it can be grueling. When we were doing Westworld, we pulled 21-hour days occasionally, average probably 16, 17-hour days, and you have to maintain your focus throughout. And you're going, gosh, it's 5 months into this thing, and we're still hitting 17 hours every day, and it's a collaborative effort. Many people of different skills, different talents, with a single interest of telling this story, whether they be carpenters, electricians, grips, teamsters, actors, film, camera folks. We're all pulling together to tell the story. So it's a team, much like a lacrosse team, and it takes a little grit. People don't really have an appreciation for it if you're outside of that work, but it takes some grit. And it takes an ability to maintain focus in a way that, is required on a field. So I think about it often. I pull from my athletic experiences and lacrosse experiences very often in my work. I finally figured it out. But at the beginning, the acting kind of undid my lacrosse career in some ways. Yeah. Yeah. So I had my two buddies, who were my year. Two of my buddies were all American senior year, and they look at me and go, "Hey, what happened to you, dude?" I was, I won that award.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, the kind of challenge of trying to balance the two, but as you're talking about the challenges of maybe leaving yourself behind as you're accessing this elite institution, a predominantly white institution, and how to navigate that. It really highlights something that we're trying hard to be good at Harlem Lacrosse. And what is somewhat exciting to me now is today's students have many, many alums who came before them to help with that, and that we do try very specifically to access that knowledge and experience. Say, hey, I've done this. I was a Harlem Lacrosse student. I went to this institution. I was on this lacrosse team. I got this internship, and these are some things that I went through, and we want to help you be good. But also, to your point about maybe leaving some of yourself behind, one thing that I'm hopeful about is that as Harlem Lacrosse continues to grow, that it's sort of it's additive to what the lacrosse community is. We're not asking people, Harlem Lacrosse students or families, to say, hey, fit into what the lacrosse community is. We're asking them to bring the richness of their community and their personal experience to the lacrosse community to enrich the whole thing. And that is when I think we're most successful.
Absolutely. And I don't think I was referencing really the lacrosse community so much as the larger academic community that's found in most of these institutions. And the cultural setting and the history, obviously the history of lacrosse at these places is bound up inside of that. So I wasn't just limiting it to the lacrosse community, but to the larger community. So just wanted to clarify there. But yeah, it is a challenge. It's a challenge, and you're absolutely right that the goal for these kids, whether they know it or not, is to bring the best of themselves to the field and to the academic settings, and bring all of it without shame, and with the tenacity that they apply to the lacrosse field. Bring it all. And sometimes that means as a very good friend of mine says, blowing up the room, metaphorically, you know, but and really claiming, if it's, you know, claiming one's space, intellectual space, you know, cultural space, bringing historical lessons that, you know, were learned from the collective and the individual, bringing it all, you know, without fear. But tough challenge.
Yeah. And I think when we are successful, and we're running a little bit short on time, but just your experience as an actor is inspiring to me as just someone who watches movies, because like I said, it seems so courageous to me. I don't have that skill set, and it's such a tough profession, but my hope is that the students of Harlem Lacrosse in some ways have a similar experience, in the sense that their experience with Harlem Lacrosse shows them that they do have self-determination. They can pursue anything they want to pursue, and the world will be open to them and will support them. And if that happens, then I think Harlem Lacrosse will be successful. If a student says, I can do anything.
I agree. And, for me, it was a courageous mistake. I don't think I had any other choice. It was just, it was, when I started doing it, it just felt like it was a new home for me that allowed me to express myself and be myself in a way that was that maybe I had only experienced in terms of fullness on the athletic field prior to that. And it just unlocked a lot of things for me. So it was out of necessity. And I had the freedom at that school to explore in a way that allowed me to find that pathway, but it was necessary. And so I think what my hope is for any student, and for these students who come through Harlem Lacrosse and programs like it, is that they have access to what is necessary for them, and that they be empowered to be uncompromising. That's what these are special places, all of these schools, special atmospheres, privileged, rarefied spaces. They really are. And they provide that level of opportunity in a non-specific way, no matter what, you choose to do what is necessary for your own fulfillment. And to ultimately, as I have experienced, and I'm so pleased that I can say this, and I wish it for everyone, I have found myself, for example, when I did Angels in America on Broadway, I found myself at moments saying, this is where I need to be in my life right now. And it's a wonderful experience, wonderful feeling, and it's empowering. And there were multiple steps along the way that brought me to that place. And certainly lacrosse played a role in it. And so I'm hoping, for all of these kids who come through your program, that it allows them down the line, or even now, to find themselves taking a moment to realize that they are where they should be.
It's beautifully said. I spoke to a student last week who was a freshman at Brown, where I went, and she earned Most Improved Player on the team. It makes me think of what you're saying. And she seems like someone who is where she needs to be. And another student who graduated from Penn, another one of these elite institutions, and another student last weekend or a couple weeks ago who won the national championship, played for Tufts. And just these kinds of experiences, and they all seem like kids. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to bring up any bad memories or anything. But
no, we used to beat their tails. I think they beat us one.
But my hope is that they are where they need to be, and that's just beautifully said. And I love your perspective on the work that we're doing at Harlem Lacrosse, and I'm a huge fan of your work as an actor, and just grateful for your support of the lacrosse community in general. So thank you so much for everything, and for joining us today, and for that great speech last year. And I look forward to staying in touch.
Well, thanks, Mike, and thank you for the great work that you're doing, because I can tell you it's one of the reasons that I've circled back to the game and become more involved in the last few years than I had been for a while. I mean, it's just super impressive. You're doing it right, and man, well done, and carry on. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Have a good one.
Yeah, man.
Take care.
Cool. You too. All right.
Thanks for tuning in to Mondays with Mike, Game Changers in Lacrosse. We release new episodes monthly on all major streaming platforms. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch the video versions. You can find us at youtube.com/Harlem Lacrosse. To learn more about the transformative work we do, visit us at harlemlacrosse.org. See you on the field.